And so how do you go about making sure that we're not falling victim to some of these phishing attacks? Well, one of the biggest ways, and one of the first things you should always look at, is the name of the company and or the person sending you an email. And this is for suspicious emails. Oftentimes what they'll do is that they'll look like it's from somebody that you know. So maybe it's my name, right? You like say you know me, my name is James Martis. I'm on the first slide of this presentation. So you get an email, it looks like it says James Martis, but actually the I isn't an I, it's a one. Or my email address is jamesmartis at company.com, and that's my normal email address, but the email address you're actually get it from is James Martis and the I is a one at company.com or something like that, where they've spoofed an email address. Or the domain of the email address, where it's at company.com, is at company with a 0 instead of an O. So at first glance, it looks legitimate, and then you answer the email or you click a link in the email. So one thing to always do is make sure who's sending me this, and is that a legitimate email address where I'm getting that from. Here is literally an example of something I received just yesterday. I know I was giving this presentation today, and lo and behold, yesterday morning, I get an email sent to me at my work email address, and it says it's from Human Resources. It has a PDF file in it, and it says that there's been a change to the part-time off policy, the paid time off policy. So I didn't click this attachment because you should never click an attachment in a nefarious email, right? You never know what's in it. You never know what's going to happen, and there's nothing good coming from it. But just to show you, this literally happened to me yesterday at my work email address. This is clearly not a legitimate email address within my organization, right? So that obviously popped out to me. And I knew that my company wouldn't send something like this anyway. So I already had 2 red flags. But I want you to keep in mind that sometimes people think, well, this is a PDF file, well, at least I could open it to see what they were asking for. I would generally say, don't ever open nefarious attachments. You never know what exactly is going on in there. Even if it seems like it's a PDF file, which you should be able to view with no problem. Don't assume that. Number 2, and I'm going to talk about things you should do with that. Within Outlook, because that's where I got this email, I can report a phishing attack. I can tell Outlook, this is a phishing email, right? So you need to put this on a list. You need to be aware of this. And there's also a working group that multiple governments throughout the world have created where you can forward these emails to so that they can also keep track of who these people are, who these phishing scammers are. It's something to keep in mind. Again, working on this presentation for just this weekend, another independent rural communications company like Highline is operating in the state of Michigan is Central Oklahoma Telephone Company. And you know what, just 2 or 3 days ago on April 10th, they posted on Twitter or X that their customers received a phishing email. And it said, hey, your webmail, your email address, your email, it looks like you received, they said, what the scammer did is it said, your webmail is getting too big, the file size for your webmail. But make sure that you can keep all of your email, just reply back with your username and password. Now, the company tweeted out saying we would never do that. No reputable company would ever ask you to reply with your username and or password. And that's correct. No company will ever do that. Keep in mind, right? This hacker must have gotten all of the email addresses and they're going to try that. And I bet you 1 or 2 people probably did reply, right? And lock these people out of their email. Another way to make sure you're not the victim of a phishing attack is to verify the source of the info of where you're coming from. Banks in particular, financial institutions, they will never ask you for your password or information by email or by text message. That is something you should never do. In fact, I would argue so much that you should never give your password to anybody, right?
Right.
We've done a session. The last session we did was on passwords where we talk about password managers. It's to the point now where I don't even know my own passwords to accounts because I have a password manager where I have a master password. That's the only password I know. It's the only one I need to know. And the way I kind of think of it like cell phones, I've got kids now who have phones, and to be honest with you, I don't know half of their numbers because I never had to memorize them, right? You put them in our phone and you just say, call my kid, or press a button and it calls. Uh, I treat that way with my password manager. I don't know 97, 98% of my passwords because they're in a password manager. So you shouldn't even know your own passwords when you think about it that way, except your master password, because your password manager is filling it in for you whenever you're logging into an account. Great way to make sure that you're protected from potentially a phishing attack, and so that you can't reply with the password because you don't know it.
Question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Do we have to worry about the password manager being hacked? Is there?
Well, certainly there's two things you can do there. One, your password for your password manager should be something that is very hard to know, right? That only you can know. And there are tricks for that, and we cover that in that session. So one thing might be using a phrase that only you know, and then you mess up the phrase,
Yeah.
right? So maybe it's something that you remember from childhood, maybe a line from a movie, and then maybe it's the first letter of each word of that phrase, right? That it would only be something that means something to you, right? And then maybe you change the vowels to numbers, those kinds of things, right? Then the second way to protect your master password for your password manager is to set up two-factor authentication. And I'm going to re-reference that at the very end of this presentation. But effectively, that's saying anytime you're logging in, you're going to get a text message with a code, right? So that way you have two forms. You have to remember your password, and you've got to enter in the code that comes in before you access your password manager. So very, very good question. Obviously, you don't want to give up the password manager.
Right.
That would be bad as well. Another important point, and this is a point I'm going to make a couple more times before this ends today, and we hear it all the time, is keep your software up to date. This is advice not only by operating systems that tell you to do that, not only by web browsers, not only by antivirus software, and not only by the individual applications that we have from the hundreds we probably have on our iPhone and Android. They all tell you keep your software up to date. Why? Because there's a number of reasons. They include patches for security vulnerabilities, which protect you from cyber threats and attacks. In fact, a lot of times when there are updates, if you ever do read them, we don't read them. I don't read them either 9 times out of 10. But sometimes I'll click on it, like, what's going to change? What new feature am I getting? And sometimes it seems really innocuous. They don't really say anything. The reason they're not saying anything is because they're fixing a hole, they're fixing a bug, they're fixing a security issue that they don't really want to get into, right? But they just want to roll out the fix to that. And this is advice that even banks will tell you, hey, if you don't want to get hacked, make sure all of your software is up to date, right? And that's just an important point, because think about it. If there's a vulnerability, it's likely in the older versions of the software, right, within the application. And so hackers know that. So if they've figured out the loophole, they want to attack the people who still have the loophole, right, until you update to the latest